Please be seated. The court is now back in session. I now hand over to the civil party lawyer to put the question to the witness. You may now proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, witness. My name is Marie Giro. I am a civil party lawyer. I have a few questions to put to you. Mr. President, with your leave, I will start by asking the witness to react to an answer he gave to a question put to him by the Office of the Co-Prosecutors. And the reference for the document is E3/97, and the French ERN is 00241884, and the Khmer ERN, and I will slow down, is 002707005, and in English is 002871110. Witness, you were questioned by the co-investigating judges, and I'll read out what you said, and I would like you to react to it. The question was as follows. When did you understand that Ieng Sary was the general supervisor of Bung Trabek camp? And you answered in two ways. I understood that when I returned from the Red Earth. And you continued by saying, and this is the part that interests me, previously I had understood that he was the principal supervisor of Cambodians who returned to the country. My question to you regarding the first part of your question, what do you mean by what you said, that Ieng Sary was the person who was responsible for Cambodians returning from abroad?
Good morning, lawyer. My understanding was that anything relating to foreign affairs or to Cambodian living overseas or Cambodian returning to Cambodia, to my understanding, Mr. Ieng Sary was responsible because he was the one who organized the returning of Cambodian back to Cambodia. Because the returnees from overseas was under the arrangement of Mr. Ieng Sary, because Mr. Ieng Sary was the person in charge of facilitating the work in order to return those people to the country, as well as to arrange for their return. That's why, in my understanding, I cannot say someone else other than Ieng Sary. For example, I would not say that Mr. Nguyen Chir was responsible for that, but it was the task within the responsibility of Mr. Ieng Sary. I have never known Mr. Nguyen Chir, but I often saw Mr. Ieng Sary, who was in contact with Cambodian people as well as foreigners overseas. That was the first point. And second point, upon our return from Dei Krahom, it was the time when I met him. At the time, he asked us what our impression was of our stay in Dei Krahom and who sent us in the first place. And then I was surprised because I wonder why he did not know that, or probably he wanted to excuse himself on that, saying that his friends or so was assigning them to do that. And because I did not understand why he did not know that, and I did not even know that those who left Daegrahom eventually died. But I then have a suspicion why all the people who left Daegrahom were dead, with the exception of his two nieces. And that remains the questions that I have not had the answer.
Thank you. Thank you, witness. There was some interruption in the interpretation. In light of your answer, I would like to give you a number of names, and I would like you to tell us whether these were Cambodians returning from abroad or not, and I would like you to react in regard to a number of names. I will give you the name Ross Sarin, which you referred to yesterday. Yesterday, in your answer to a question put to you by the prosecutor, you said that he was your brother-in-law, and by the way, you said that his wife was a civil party in the case. You also said that Sarin was the director of Pochengtong Airport, and that you met him in Beng Trabek in 1976. May I therefore ask you to confirm whether Ross Sarin was a Cambodian returning from abroad?
Response. I can say with 100% certainty that Mr. Rusarin and 3 of his children were the Cambodian returnees from overseas.
Je vous remercie. Vous avez indiqué...
Thank you. Yesterday, you told the co-prosecutor that you found Ross Sarin in Beng Trabek. During the first days you spent there, what were the impressions you had when you saw him? And did he tell you anything after several months of separation? What was his state of mind?
My impression of him at that time was that he was disappointed and depressed as well, because he was being locked up in the camp.
Vous avez également indiqué...
Yesterday, you also stated that you found the name of Ross Sarin on the list of detainees at S21. You also said that he was called by Ankar when he was at Beng Trabek. Were you present at the time when he was called, during the meeting at the time when he was called?
Response. At that time, there was a Congress, and Pum was the presenter in that Congress, and Mr. Rusaran Pungton Mimau and a number of other Cambodian returnees who were taken away. I wanted to say goodbye or see them off, but I could not leave the meeting room, and I eventually did not meet them.
Merci, Monsieur le témoin.
Thank you, witness. At that point in time, during that period, Did you understand why Ross Sarin was summoned by Anchor?
That I do not know. And I thought at that time that Angka might have needed him in order to restore or revitalize the Bo Chin Tung airport at that time. That's what I thought at that time.
Thank you. Thank you, witness. Does the name Ham Sokong ring a bell to you? I hope I did not mispronounce that name. Does that name mean anything to you?
I know Ham Sukung very well because I knew him when he was in France. He stays in one city blocks known as the Netherlands building blocks over there.
Was he a Cambodian who returned from abroad?
Yes, he was.
Lors de votre parcours que vous avez décrit hier, entre Car 15, Bang Trabec, Terre Rouge et puis à nouveau Bang Trabec, l'avez-vous revu pendant cette...
After what you said regarding your movement from the airport to Bang Trabec and so on and so forth, did you see him again? The beginning of the question did not come through, Mr. President. Perhaps Council should repeat the question completely.
I saw him the last time when I was doing the earthwork in the potato plantation. He waved his hand saying goodbye, and he was taken away by a motorbike out of the Krohom.
Mr. President, the Council is speaking a bit too fast.
Monsieur Ham Sokong?
Do you know what became of Mr. Ham Sokong?
To date, I have not known or seen him again. I do not even recall whether I came across his name in the list of prisoners in S21.
Merci, Monsieur le témoin.
Thank you, witness. Does the name Hock Key mean anything to you?
Yes, I know. I know this name, Swai Hock Key.
Était-il un Cambodgien rentré de l'étranger?
Was he a Cambodian who returned from abroad?
Yes, he was.
L'avez-vous retrouvé, là encore, dans votre parcours?
Did you see him again in your movements between K15 and Bang Trabec?
He went to Dei Krohom and he died over there.
Savez-vous, Monsieur le témoin?
Witness, do you know how Mr. Hockey died?
It is difficult to say exactly, but to my personal recollection, people over there said he committed suicide. But according to his wife, she said she was not sure of the reason for his death. The Khmer Rouge might have killed him, but that I do not know exactly. What I knew was that he died in Daegrahom.
Merci, Monsieur le témoin.
Thank you, witness. To further extrapolate on your answer, I would like to quote an excerpt from a book, Mr. President. I will quote extracts of Khmer Rouge documents. The exhibit number is D281. The ERN is 002888019, and Khmer is 0083170, and there is no English translation of this document. I would like to read a passage of your book, witness, in order for you to react to what you said with regard to the obscure circumstances under which Mr. Hock Key died. I propose to read the paragraph which I would like you to react to. And in that paragraph, you explain why you wrote your book. You said, and I quote, "My intention was not to write a history book, but to talk about indoctrination, fear, hunger, and indoctrination and opportunism within the Khmer Rouge." I talked about the portrait of some of my companions who were robbed of their humanity, who were just looking for food to survive on. I have tried to talk about the character of some Khmer Rouge. I have reserved a privileged position to people who are not privileged. Some people escaped, some committed suicide, but they remain in my mind and in my heart. I would like you to react to this passage, witness. Do you know that the only solutions that were open to those in your camp were to escape or to commit suicide?
I believed that the true witnesses are those who died. We, the ones who are living, are not the real witnesses, as we can only say about something from our heart.
Thank you, witness. Now I'm going to change topics, and I'm going to look at your second stay at Bung Trabek. You said yesterday very clearly that following your stay at Daegrahom, you had spent the last months of the regime at Bung Trabek, and I apologize for arousing this emotion in you, but I think it's important to speak about this, and of course, I don't want to disturb you, so I'm now going to turn to much more practical questions, say to so, and ask you to and seek reaction to my questions about your second stay at Bung Trabek. You said to the prosecutors yesterday that you had first been placed in B30, and then you were transferred to B32. And you explained yesterday very clearly that there were 3 camps, B30, B31, and B32. And I have some very brief questions on the way B30 and B32 were managed. In the continuation of the questions that were put to you by the prosecutor regarding B15. And my question was, did the Khmer Rouge cadres use intellectuals to supervise the prisoners?
My apology. The Khmer Rouge, they were like the Nazis. They appointed some people from our group to supervise ourselves. And I believe that was the Nazis practiced.
And taking up on your answer, can you tell us who was the person in charge or the leader or whatever that person was called of B30 when you were there?
As I recall, it was Mr. Hui. He also came from overseas. Do you want to know the name of the person or the Cambodian who came from overseas, or you want to know the name of the Khmer Rouge cadre in that camp?
Est-ce que vous
Can you specify what kind of interaction existed between the Khmer Rouge cadre and the person from abroad who was managing the camp? And maybe you could provide us with the names of both of these people if you still remember them.
After I arrived from Dakrahom and stayed at Bang Trabek, I recall that there was no supervisors in that location prior to our departure to Dakrahom. We were actually then supervised by Evidentiary and his subordinates who were close to him. And at B30, there was Hum Hui, who was a good person, as I recall.
Did you witness the election or the re-election or the renomination of Hum Hui?
Yes, I did. Everyone did. And Evidentiary was the person who chaired that meeting. First, each office, that is B30, B31 and 32 respectively, held an all-together meeting, and a little bit after, each office had its own meeting in order to select the committee. Evidentiary instructed the overseas Cambodians to nominate and select among ourselves to play supervisory role within each office. At that time, the situation was less intensive. And actually, from the early stage, there was no consultation with the people staying in the office. Everything was appointed by Angka. But at that particular stage, Insari said we would conduct it in a democratic way and that we should nominate people to be in their supervisory role. And he said that would be a true democratic approach practiced by Angka at that time.
Merci.
Thank you for your answer. Witness, who was the head of B32's committee when you were there?
It was Hao Nam Hong.
Merci.
Thank you, witness. Did you attend his nomination or his renomination?
Yes, I did.
Yang Sari.
Was Yang Sari there during this nomination?
Yes, Yang Sari was present. He was the chair of the meeting.
Thank you, witness. You have just told us, while speaking about the nomination of B32, you brought up both meetings that you attended in Yang Sari's presence. And this is what you told us yesterday. You told us that you had seen Yang Sari twice, once at B30 and once at B32. And you were questioned by the prosecutor yesterday on both of these meetings. And I'd like to go a little bit more in detail by using, if you allow me, Mr. President, excerpts from your book, I believe in the Khmer Rouge, in which you describe quite in detail both of these meetings. So we are still using document D141 1.2, and regarding the French meeting, we only have French and a Khmer version, French ERN 002888092, Khmer 008312446. So this is page 213 of your book, Witness, and I would like to read out a short excerpt of the paragraph I will ask you to comment on. You indicate regarding this first meeting at B30 in Yang Sari's presence, you say the following. Yang Sari then spoke about the enemies who relentlessly sabotage our noble enterprise at the service of our beloved people. He draws a small history of the struggle of his group against the domination of the Vietnamese Communist Party and mentions a few names of these abominable traitors, Hosnim, Chuk, Safim, Koitun, Nomsun, and he wants to transmit an essential message to it. The great merit of his group is having been able to Khmerize the Cambodian Communist Party. Otherwise, Cambodia would have been definitely absorbed by Vietnam. And if we have been mistreated up until now, it is because of the agents of the Vietnamese Communist Party. This excerpt from your book, Witness, does this give rise to any kind of comment from you?
I have no further comment, and I stand by that statement.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. You described then the second meeting, and you described it in just as detailed a way. At Index D141 1.2, French ERN 00288100, Khmer 00831254. And you indicate regarding this second meeting, and here again I will read to you the relevant paragraph on which I seek your reaction. You indicate, at the end of October, our meeting was held in the presence of Ieng Sary to nominate a new team of leaders at B32. I tried to remain unnoticed. I was just satisfied to be present and just to applaud. Hon Nong Hong was kept in his function of president of the head of a committee of 5 members. Ieng Sary repeated pretty much the same thing that he had said a few days before. We had to fight to death against Vietnam and the Indochinese Federation. It is either them or us. There's no other alternative. We have to stand up against aggressors. Vietnam is more and more isolated, and the international community supports us. Here again, witness, does this passage that I just read out to you give rise to any comment from you?
No, I don't have any further comment. I still stand by my understanding as it reflects what I heard back then. President, Council, please try to slow down. You may proceed, but please slow down.
Thank you, President. I am coming to the end of my questions. Did you hold any kind of diary? Or did you keep a diary between July 1976, when you returned to Cambodia, and the beginning of 1979?
My wife and I always made a note in our book, and in the book that I published for the first part was mainly based on the diary of my wife. When we fled to Thailand, I based my writing of the book initially on her diary, and for the latter part of the book, that is after my departure from Dai Krahom, it was based on my own notes.
Merci.
Thank you. So, clearly speaking, what you're explaining is that in the first part of your account, you based yourself essentially on your wife's diary. Then, as of Terre Rouge, Dai Krahom, you took notes on your own that helped you to write your book. Is that so, witness?
My wife had a small notebook, and she took note since she arrived in Cambodia prior to my arrival, of what she saw, of how she felt. And when I arrived, she showed me her notebook, and she kept it secretly with her. And she kept writing notes in that book until we left Dai Krahom. And that's how I based the book. And then the portion of the book from Dai Krahom onward, it was based on my note.
Et pour
And in order to get to the core of my question, the chapter of your book entitled Phnom Penh under Ieng Sari, of which I read the 2 excerpts, was this chapter written on the basis of your notes, so that I may understand what are the sources you used to write this chapter?
I wrote a book based on what I wrote back then, until the time I was at a Khao Ai Dang camp, refugee camp at the Thai border, and also after I discussed and talked with my wife.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, witness. When did you write the first draft of this book?
It was when I fled to Thailand. That was in late 1979.
When did you publish this book?
The book was published in 2003, and the reason for its 2003 publication was that I drafted the book and I just left it. My intention was for my children to read, but one day Henri Locat met me, he read it, and other people, other scholars including David Chandler and Stephen Hedder encouraged me to publish the book so that other people may know of my account. So then I decided to send it to a French printing house for its publication.
Thank you, witness. When we read your book, we feel that many, many narrative threads intertwine together with more political historical considerations. Can you simply explain to us quickly the way you wrote this book? Because this work, of course, will be an important element in the case. And I would like to understand how you wrote this book.
In general, I wrote this book not based on the revenge or anything like that, or that how we were mistreated by the Khmer rules. My main goal in writing the book is that under whatever condition we are living, and if we are detained in a location without the freedom of movement, then how we would react to such a condition. So I expressed the feeling in the book of how people would react. Even personally, everyone was different. People would think differently and react differently, or change his or her identity. Things evolved, and sometimes we may be considered in carrying out a good deed, and I don't want to say that I was so miserable under the Khmer Rouge regime. That's not the intention of my writing that book.
Thank you, witness. I have a last question as a conclusion regarding the title of your book, J'ai cru au Khmer Rouge, I believed in the Khmer Rouge. And my question is, until when did you believe in the Khmer Rouge, and when did you stop believing in them?
As I mentioned earlier, that I support the resistance movement, that I supported Khieu Samphan, Hu Nam and Hu Jun, and that I supported the Khmer Rouge, that I started since I was around 25 years old. However, I'd like to add that this does not mean that was in fact the title of the book was not of my choice. It was recommended by the printing house. So it is difficult for me to respond to your question.
That's perfectly suited as an answer. Thank you very much, witness. I have no further questions. Thank you, President.
President, thank you. Judges of the bench, do you have any further question for the witness? Judge Lavenge, you may proceed.
Yes, thank you, President. And thank you, witness, for your statement and for the efforts you made traveling all the way to here. Witness, I wish to return to this meeting with Ieng Sary at Bong Trabec. And I also would like to quote a passage in addition to the passages that were already quoted by the civil party lawyer. So again, I am referring to your book, that is to say document D141 1.2, on pages 214 and 215 of your book, that is to say French ERN 00288093 to 94, English 00785878 to 79, and Khmer, I only have here a broader range of ERNs, and the list is 00659077 to 00659085. So I wish now to return to this meeting with Ieng Sary and on what you say in particular regarding what Ieng Sary said concerning Von Veen. You say the following: the ministry nominated another person as a bad element coming from abroad. Von Pini, who was denounced, he said, in 3 confessions as a CIA agent, before, here you quote Ieng Sary's statements, so it's in before, he specifies, it was only necessary to have 2 incriminations, but now I'm requiring 3 incriminations before arresting someone. So my question is the following. you put quotation marks, so this is a quote. Can you confirm, can you remind us that this is what Ieng Sary said personally?
I can confirm that these were the words that I recall Ieng Sary said. Wan Pini was a long-time friend or acquaintance. He was also a friend of my elder sibling, so I had a good relation with him. So whatever Ieng Sary said regarding Wan Pini caught my interest, and I can confirm that were the words spoken by Ieng Sary.
Thank you for this answer. Now let me continue with your book, because you mentioned quite a few interesting things, and let me read again. Ieng Sary continued his presentation by saying that Kampuchea is moving ahead towards a greater democracy. In order to achieve this, he asked us to take example on our friends who criticized Savan. Because in this meeting, indeed, other people from Bon Trabec had criticized Savan. And then you quote the following, and you state that this is what Ieng Sary said. Open quote, "It is not easy," he pursued. "Often, when I meet our peasants, as was the case last week in Chuk, in Kampot province, I question the members of the cooperatives to know if they do indeed eat 3 times a day, if they have 3 meals a day. And first of all, they do not dare respond clearly, but then when they feel that they can trust me, they say no. So then I asked them, why didn't they ask for the 3 meals they are entitled to from the people managing the cooperative? And you see, our brothers and peasant sisters have a lot to say to us, but they do not dare use their freedom. So we have created a new method to encourage them to speak. I tell them that they should no longer be afraid. The prisons do not exist here. Before, we often heard insults such as akuk, despicable cook, achap cook, despicable prisoner, despicable detainee. So here again, I would like to know if, as far as you remember, this corresponds to what Ieng Sary actually said.
I can confirm that these are the words of Mr. Ieng Sary to my recollection.
Alors je poursuis cette lecture.
Let me continue reading what you said. Looking solemn and satisfied, he continues and says, we should stop using the word prisons. Prisons do not exist in our country. On the international scene, our international policy based on state sovereignties is supported by the overwhelming majority of countries in the world, including non-aligned countries. The Soviet revisionists and their Vietnamese accomplices are increasingly isolated. To fight the enemy abroad, we must first of all sweep away the enemy within. Our party has conquered the enemy within the country. Without their external accomplices, the Vietnamese accomplices would not be able to conquer us. End of quote. And you continue and say the following. Then he invited us to speak, to use our freedom in such a unique country in the world where we could say everything. Nobody would do us any harm because prisons had been abolished. Again, does this reflect what Mr. Ieng Sari stated? Are these the words used by Mr. Ieng Sari?
Response. I can swear or conclude that these were the words spoken by Ieng Sari at the time. President, witness, you are testifying in your capacity as the witness. You are not supposed to make or draw any conclusion in your statement. Witness, with respect, Mr. President, I think you may got my answer wrong. Actually, my testimony earlier was what I can recollect. So I recollect that Ieng Sari spoke those words at the time.
Monsieur le témoin, dans votre souvenir.
Witness, to the best of your recollection, do you think that the people you were able to meet had the right to ask for food when they were not sufficiently fed? Did such a right exist?
But to the best of recollection, no, people were not entitled to enough food to eat. They did not have sufficient food to eat at the time.
Et les gens que vous avez rencontrés ou l'expérience.
Regarding those you met and the experience you had at K15, Bang Trabek, Red Earth, and elsewhere, did your experience show that these were places of detention? Now, when you hear Mr. Ieng Sari say that there were no prisons in democratic Kampuchea, did this elicit any reactions? Would this elicit any reactions?
But respond. At the time, I was taken aback by that statement because I thought that I was being imprisoned now. I was being in the prison, and the prison was actually widespread across the country, but I could do nothing about it. I dare not say anything, but at the times I knew very well that I was being in the prison, and at that time the entire Cambodian territory was the prison.
Et plus précisément, à l'issue.
To be more specific, at the end of the meeting during which you heard those words, were you told that you were free to leave Bang Trabek? Were you told that you could move about freely, that you could go and meet your family members? Was your passport returned to you?
No, those were the words he spoke to satisfy himself, but the reality was that the truth was the truth. And for example, when we were in Bang Trabay, at some point in time, they also offer us the crocodile flesh to eat, but that was meant to simply please ourselves to mitigate the situation or so. But in reality, we did not have any rights at all. We do not have, for example, freedom to travel. We could not travel back to France. And at that time, nobody could imagine that they could be free to move around.
Monsieur le témoin, est-ce que
Witness, during your experience, during the democratic Kampuchea regime, did there come a time when legal explanations were given to you, explaining why you were placed in custody where you were detained? Did they give you any legal reasons for such detention? Did they tell you whether a system or procedures existed allowing you to challenge your detention in those places?
To be precise on that point, at the time, Angka was always right. Upon my return from the Graham, at that time, they call it the Communist Party of Cambodia. I would like to bring up an example. Mr. Ieng Sary once said that we were entitled, we had the right to speak. He asked us whether or not we were given 3 meals per day. We did not respond differently. And Mr. Savon at that time said that that was correct. We were offered 3 meals a day. But what was the reality at that time? At that time, it was the regimes that people strive to survive by ourselves. And we ask who Savon was. Savon was Angka. Now, for example, at that time, if we criticize that Pol Pot had shortcoming, Pol Pot did not do the right thing, then we would be in trouble. If it was the monarchy regime, we could probably criticize that the king had some shortcoming. But in that regime, we said that Angka had any shortcoming. We were not allowed to say that. We could not say that anyone had any problems or any shortcoming at all. So we were not allowed to say. So Angka was perfect. Angka was always correct. Whenever Angka said Angka was wrong, then the entire Angka structure would be dissolved. But that was my observation, that Angka was always correct.
Une question des questions de détail, mais
This is a question that is aimed at obtaining details. You said in your book that you participated in the demolition of the Phnom Penh Cathedral. Did you find out why that cathedral had to be demolished?
response. At the time I arrived in Phnom Penh was just a short period of time. I was still staying at K15. And at one point in time, they took us in one truck, some tens of us, to undertake a job. And then I do not know where it was because it was at night at that time. But when I got there, when I approached that place, I heard people talking, many people talking to each other. When we got there, they assigned us to demolish the buildings with the purpose of getting the iron which were used as the frame or structure of the building. It was somewhere near the railway station.
À cette époque, vous aviez réalisé quel type de bâtiment c'était ou n'en aviez?
During that period, did you know what kind of building it was, or you did not have an idea as to what kind of building it was?
I had seen this building when I was young. It was a former Catholic church.
Et est-ce que les raisons pour lesquelles cette église était détruite ont été évoquées devant vous?
Did they give any reasons why the church was destroyed? Did they say anything about that? Did they say it was destroyed because it was a Catholic church or for any other reason related to something else?
At the time, they did not make it clear concerning the purpose of the demolition of this building. When we got there, immediately we were given a hammer to knock down the building. Nobody explained us precisely why we had to do that. We simply took part in the demolition. And later on, we found that there were irons. And then later on, when I got to S21, I saw the iron bars which were used to lock people up. My mind was that probably these iron were actually taken from the building that we demolished, but I was not sure it could have been from that place.
Une autre question dans votre...
I have another question for you. In your book, you mention the name of one of Mr. Ieng Seri's collaborators in several places, and you say that his name was Chip. And you specifically state that he was the person who went to fetch you shortly before the arrival of the Vietnamese. Are you sure of this name, Chip? Or it may have been the name Chim?
I met him, and when I saw his face, I find his face familiar. When his picture was printed on the newspaper, I saw that was him. He was the close aide of So Hong.
Je suis pas sûr d'avoir bien saisi le sens.
I am not quite sure I understood the thrust of your answer. Do you mean that having seen the photograph of someone called Chim in the press, you thought that was a person you refer to as Chip in your book? Is that your testimony?
I am not 100% sure, but he may be the person.
Vous nous avez exposé, monsieur,
Witness, you have presented to us your painful personal experience. I have another question for you. If it is very painful for you, please, you may refrain from answering it. But could you tell me, sir, following your experience in democratic Cambodia, what were the consequences for you and your close family members? You are a member of a very broad family. You have many brothers and sisters. Can you please tell us what you experienced, what you felt?
My memory of that was that my family was separated and my parents were executed and they arrested them. And then 4 other biological brothers of mine and my brothers and sisters, in-laws and nephew and nieces died during that period. Only a few of them who could flee the country and survive. And as for my families, my wife's families, they were some of them arrested and killed. And as for my friends, the majority of them, both friends whom I know in Cambodia or overseas, died. So the 4-year period of experience in life was so sorrowful that it ruins my happiness for the entire life. And I would like to make it clear that I am coming here not to take the revenge, but I simply would like to come here to contribute in order to ensure that such atrocity and heinous crimes would never ever occur again. I do not come here in order to take any revenge, because it was over. Nothing can fully compensate what we had lost, but our mission is to ensure that such crimes would not happen again. As human beings, we were born good, but later on there were 2 elements inside human being, the bad elements and the good elements. And the bad elements would bring about destruction and tragedy, as what we experienced during the democratic Cambodia period.
Part of your family resided in Phnom Penh. Among survivors in your family, some of them relate to you their experience of the evacuation of Phnom Penh. Can you say a few words on that subject?
But
my family at that time resided along the road leading to Pochentong Airport. It was close to K15. At that time, I had a brother who was a diplomat of Cambodia to oversee. And when the country was plunged into war, my parents fled our home, and she came to live with my brothers. And like other Cambodian families at that times, they brought their families together to live. And my brother's home was overseas. So according to the account of my relatives, and particularly my parents, they say that they were evacuated. At the time, I had a brother who used to be a Buddhist monk, and then later on he became a professor in one of the universities in Phnom Penh. So at that time, my brothers and sister tore apart their certificates and their degrees, and they did not bring them along with them. And then they traveled all the way to my mother's hometown in Preikamba district. They stayed there for a short period of times, and then the base authority over there did not accept them. So we had to move to another place, to my father's place. Actually, they did not want my family to stay in Samrang Liu village, and so they continue to travel to their hometown along the river. So they try to find the means in order to take all the family members to my father's hometown. And then along the way, we met people who told us that we must not go to our hometown, but he insisted that he used to be a Buddhist monk and also a teacher, so villagers over there would love him, so he insisted on going. So he went there, and a few days later, he was arrested. They told him that he would be taken away in order to produce some bucket or so. But then my mother kept waiting for my brothers, and she insisted that we try to look for him, but we had lost him, and we lost contacts with him. And then the villagers over there told us that we must not stay in that place any longer, otherwise our life would be at serious risk. And then later on we found that he were imprisoned in somewhere, and then later on he was taken away, which we never heard of him anymore. So both the professors and other subordinates of his were taken away to somewhere in Bat Nambong province. So they were all taken to Bat Nambong province, and along the ways they were not given food. They starved, and in one times they were so hungry that he picked the dead cow skins to eat. And my brothers and his wife, as well as their children, died over there. Only The survivors included my wife, my sister, and one niece who was from my brother's families who survived to date. They are now residing overseas. As for my third older brother, he was the fishery engineer. During the war time, he went overseas and he was trained to raise some kinds of fish in Tunisia, and I met him over there. And after the war in Cambodia in 1971, he was eager to bring his entire family to live in France. And he told me that he had been a teacher at university, and then he also personally knew Ho Yun, so he thought that it would be all right to come back to the country. So eventually he returned to Cambodia. Then this entire family, upon their arrival in Cambodia, including their 3 children as well, disappeared. We never hear any news from them. We did not know where they were executed. And as for my fourth brother, it was somewhere in Tribunal. He worked there in somewhere around Tribunal, but this entire family of my brother, including his kids as well, died during that period as well. And my house in my hometown was also demolished. This is my personal family history. It's still in my vivid memory, but although it was over.
Témoin pour.
Thank you, witness. I wish to thank you for your testimony and for sharing with us probably very painful memories. I have no further questions to put to the witness.
The President, thank you. The time is now appropriate for lunch adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn from now until 1:30 this afternoon. This afternoon, the Chamber will continue to hear the testimony by witness Ong Thong Hướng, and we will resume this afternoon with the question put by the defense teams for Mr. Nguyen Chia before the 2 defense teams. Court officer is now instructed to facilitate the room for the witness to take a rest during the break, and please have him back to this courtroom before 1:30 this afternoon. International Defense Counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just on my feet to inform you that I'm informed that our client is suffering from back pain, a headache, and a general lack of concentration. He would like to spend the afternoon in his holding cell. That's our application. Thank you.
The President, thank you. Noting the request by Mr. Nguyen Chia through his defense counsel to follow the proceeding remotely through audio-visual means for the remainder of today's proceeding due to his health condition, the request is granted, Mr. Nguyen Chia may follow the proceedings from holding self through audio-visual means for the remainder of today's proceedings. Mr. Nguyen Chia has expressly waived his right not to be present directly in this courtroom. The defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia is required to submit the chamber immediately the waiver of his right not to be present directly in the courtroom with the signature or some print of Mr. Nguyen Chia. AV assistant is instructed to connect the audio-visual equipment for Mr. Nguyen Chia to follow the proceeding remotely from the holding cell. Security guards are instructed to bring Mr. Nguyen Chia and Mr. Kyu Sampon to the holding cell downstairs. And this afternoon, Mr. Nguyen Chia is to remain in the holding cell where the audio-visual equipment is connected for him to follow the proceeding remotely. As for Mr. Kyu Sampon, he is to be brought to this courtroom before 1:30. The court is now adjourned.